The arrow-slit windows had no curtains, no drapes, not even a scrap of fabric to soften the harsh morning light that sliced through the stone halls like blades, and Gwendolyn Nash stood in the center of the great hall, with her portfolio bag sliding off her shoulder, staring at the most magnificent disaster of interior design she had ever encountered in her 8 years of professional work. Her client had contacted her through an intermediary, someone named Corvus, who spoke in clipped formal sentences and offered her triple her usual rate to assess and potentially redesign what he called a historic property in the countryside. Historic was one word for it. Medieval fortress was more accurate. The castle rose from a cliff edge an hour outside the city, all dark stone and towers that pierced the sky, surrounded by woods so thick they seemed to swallow sound itself. Gwendolyn had expected old money eccentricity. She had not expected a vampire king. The man who descended the curved stone staircase was not a man at all, not really, though he wore the shape of one with unnerving perfection. White hair fell past his shoulders, catching the light like spun silver. His skin held the same pale luminescence, as though he had been carved from moonstone and given breath. He moved with a grace that made her think of predators, of things that hunted in absolute silence. His eyes were dark, impossibly dark, like looking into a well with no bottom. He wore black, modern, and tailored, which somehow made the ancient castle around him seem even more anachronistic. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he stopped and regarded her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are the designer," he said. Not a question. His voice carried an accent she could not place, something old and layered, consonants shaped by centuries. Gwendolyn Nash. She extended her hand out of pure professional instinct, then wondered if vampires shook hands, if that was something they did, but he took her hand in his, and the touch was cool and firm and sent a small shock up her arm. "I am Erhardt," he said, releasing her hand. "Erhardt Eberus, king of the Eastern bloodline, though that title means less now than it once did." King. She had read about vampire hierarchies in the frantic research she had done the night before, after Corvus had finally admitted what sort of client she would be meeting. There were courts, ancient families, territories divided by blood and age and power. Kings were old, older than countries, and they ruled with an absoluteness that made human monarchs look like children playing dress-up. "Your castle needs curtains," Gwendolyn said, because she had never been good at formal pleasantries, and the words came out before she could stop them. Erhardt blinked. For a moment, she thought she had offended him, that he would throw her out or worse, but then his mouth curved just slightly into something that might have been amusement. "Does it?" "Yes." She set her bag down and turned in a slow circle, taking in the great hall properly. The ceiling soared 30 feet above, supported by thick stone columns. The floor was flagstone, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. There were tapestries on some walls, faded and moth-eaten, depicting battles and hunts. A massive fireplace dominated one end, large enough to roast an entire ox. And everywhere, that harsh, unforgiving light from windows that were designed for defense, not comfort. "It needs curtains and rugs and furniture that was made after the Renaissance. It needs lamps and color and something, anything, that makes it feel like people actually live here. I live here. Do you? Or do you just exist here?" She pulled out her tablet, already making notes. "This place is a fortress. It's beautiful in its way, but it's cold, unwelcoming. It feels like you're waiting for an army to siege you." Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. "Perhaps I am." Gwendolyn looked up at him. He stood very still, hands clasped behind his back, watching her with that unreadable expression. There was loneliness in him, she realized. It clung to him like the cold clung to the stone walls. This castle was not a home. It was a place to hide, to defend, to survive. Nothing more. "When was the last time you had guests?" she asked quietly. 200 years ago, Erhardt said. "Perhaps longer. I do not keep track." "Right." She tapped her stylus against the screen. "So, do you want me to assess the property and give you a proposal? Or were you just curious what a human designer would say about your fortress?" He moved then, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He was tall, at least 6'4", And this close she could see the inhuman perfection of his features, the way his skin seemed to glow from within. He smelled like winter, like snow and pine and something darker, something that made her heartbeat kick up despite herself. Erhardt reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He held it out to her. "What is this?" she asked, not taking it yet. "The deed," he said. "To the castle, the land, everything." Her hand froze halfway to the paper. "I don't understand. You say the castle needs curtains." His voice dropped lower, intimate, as though sharing a secret. "Then decorate it. Make it whatever you believe it should be. I give you full authority. You can't just give me your castle. I am not giving it to you. I am granting you stewardship, dominion over its aesthetic future." That almost smile returned. "Unless you are refusing the commission." Gwendolyn took the deed with trembling fingers. It was real parchment, thick and cream-colored, covered in elaborate script. Her name was already written in, the ink still wet. Below it, in a bold, slashing hand, Erhardt Eberus, witnessed and sealed. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, "but you are not wrong. The castle does need curtains." She looked up at him, at this ancient creature who ruled over emptiness and stone, and felt something shift in her chest. Dangerous, her mind warned. This was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with fangs or blood. But she had never walked away from a challenge in her life, and she was not about to start now. "Fine," Gwendolyn said. "Then let's start with measurements." The castle was enormous. Gwendolyn spent the first 3 days just mapping it out, pacing through corridors and climbing spiral staircases, sketching floor plans and taking photographs. There were 40 rooms in the main keep alone, not counting the towers, the undercroft, the battlements. Most were empty, thick with dust and silence. A few held furniture so old it should have been in a museum, carved wooden chests, canopy beds with rotting velvet curtains, chairs that looked like they had been made for torture rather than comfort. Erhardt appeared occasionally, a silent presence watching from doorways. He never interfered, never offered opinions. He simply observed, those dark eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. On the 4th day, she found the library. It was in the western tower, up a narrow staircase that spiraled so high she was dizzy by the time she reached the top. The room beyond was circular, lined floor to ceiling with books, thousands of them, tens of thousands, spines in every language she recognized, and many she did not. The smell of old paper and leather and dust was overwhelming. A single chair sat by the window, worn smooth, a small table beside it with a book lying open. Gwendolyn picked up the book carefully. The pages were illuminated manuscript, gold leaf catching the light, illustrations of stars and celestial charts. The text was Latin, she thought, or something close to it. "Astronomy," Erhardt said from the doorway, and she jumped, nearly dropping the book. He moved like a ghost, soundless. "From the 13th century. I knew the monk who wrote it." She set the book down reverently. "You've read all of these?" "Several times over." He entered the room, running his fingers along the spines with something like affection. "Books do not judge. They do not fear. They are reliable in a way people are not." "Lonely," Gwendolyn said. "That's a lonely way to live." Erhardt turned to look at her, and for a moment, his expression was completely open, completely vulnerable. "Yes," he said simply. She wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but what comfort could she give to someone who had lived for centuries, in self-imposed isolation? Instead, she pulled out her tablet and started making notes. "The library stays as is," she said, "but better lighting, and that chair needs to be reupholstered before it collapses." "As you wish." "Stop that." He raised an eyebrow. "Stop what?" "Deferring to me. This is your home. You must have opinions." "I have not thought of it as a home for a very long time," Erhardt said. He moved to the window, looking out over the forest below. "It is a place I defend, a stronghold, nothing more." "Why?" She came to stand beside him, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. "Why just defend? Why not live?" He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, almost dreamlike. "I am old, Gwendolyn. Older than most of my kind still walking this earth. I have seen empires rise and crumble. I have loved and lost and buried more people than you can imagine. This castle was built for war, and war is all I have known. To live, to truly live, requires hope, and hope is a luxury I cannot afford." Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the weight of centuries pressed down on his words, and who was she to contradict that? Instead, she did what she did best. She made a plan. "Then let me give you hope," Gwendolyn said. "Or at least curtains? We'll start there and see what happens." He looked down at her, and something in his expression softened. "You are strange," he said, "and bold. I cannot decide if you are brave or foolish." "Both, probably," she grinned up at him. "Now show me where you keep the heating system, because it is freezing in here, and I'm not working in a castle that feels like a walk-in refrigerator." That startled a laugh out of him, a real laugh, low and rich and entirely unexpected. The sound wrapped around her like warmth, and Gwendolyn realized with a jolt that she was in trouble. She was falling for a vampire king. How spectacularly stupid. The work began in earnest. Gwendolyn hired a crew of contractors from the city, people who specialized in historic preservation. They arrived in trucks loaded with materials, bolts of fabric, paint samples, lumber, tools. She met them at the castle gates and led them inside, watching their faces as they took in the scope of the project. "Jesus," muttered her lead contractor, a burly man named Tom. "This is going to take months." "I know," Gwendolyn said. "Let's get started." Erhardt kept to the shadows during the day, avoiding the workers. Gwendolyn suspected he slept somewhere deep in the castle, some lightless chamber where the sun could not reach. But every evening, as the crew packed up and left, he appeared. He would find her wherever she was working, measuring windows in the great hall, sorting fabric samples in what would become the drawing room, arguing with electricians about wiring, and he would simply be there, a silent presence at her shoulder. "You do not have to supervise me," she said one night, exasperated, as she climbed a ladder to hang a curtain rod. "I'm not going to steal the silver." "There is no silver in this castle," Erhardt said mildly. "For obvious reasons?" She paused, glancing down at him. "Right. Vampire thing." "Vampire thing," he agreed. He moved closer to the ladder, one hand resting on the frame to steady it. "And I am not supervising. I am observing. There is a difference." "Observing me specifically, or the work in general?" "You." He said it without hesitation, without embarrassment. "You are fascinating." Heat crept up her neck. She focused very hard on aligning the curtain rod, forcing her hands to stay steady. "I'm really not. I'm just good at my job." "You see beauty where others see only function. You take stone and cold and transform it into warmth. That is not merely being good at your job, that is artistry." "Flattery will get you upgraded curtains," Gwendolyn said, trying to lighten the moment, but her voice came out breathless. He smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed his entire face. He looked younger, less weary, almost human. "Then I shall continue to flatter you shamelessly." She descended the ladder, acutely aware of how close they were standing. He had not moved back. She could count the silver strands in his white hair, see the faint pattern of veins beneath his translucent skin. His eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel pinned, caught like prey under a predator's gaze. But she did not feel afraid. "Why did you really hire me?" Gwendolyn asked quietly. "You could have anyone. You could compel someone to do this for free, couldn't you? That's a vampire power." Erhardt's expression shuddered slightly. "Yes. I could compel obedience. I could rewrite thoughts, bury memories, make you believe whatever I wished. But I have done that before, and it brings no satisfaction. I wanted someone who would see this place clearly, without glamour or fear. I wanted honesty." "And you thought a random interior designer would give you that?" "Corvus recommended you. He said you once told a billionaire his penthouse looked like a sterile hospital room and refused to work with him unless he agreed to add color." Erhardt's mouth twitched. "That level of candor is rare. I got eviscerated in reviews for that." "And yet you did not compromise." "No," Gwendolyn admitted. "I didn't. That is why I hired you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cool against her temple. "You do not bend, even for kings." Her breath caught. They were standing too close, close enough that if she leaned forward even an inch, she would be in his arms. The thought sent a thrill of heat through her, dangerous and intoxicating. "I should finish the curtains," she managed. "Yes," Erhardt said, but he did not move. Neither did she. The moment stretched, taut and electric, until finally he stepped back with visible effort. "I will leave you to your work." He was gone before she could respond, moving with that inhuman speed, and Gwendolyn sagged against the ladder, her heart pounding. This was a bad idea, a terrible idea. Falling for a client was unprofessional. Falling for a centuries-old vampire king was suicidal. But God help her, she was already halfway gone. The great hall transformed first. Gwendolyn hung heavy velvet curtains in deep crimson and gold, rich colors that softened the harsh light and made the space feel intimate despite its size. She brought in rugs, thick wool with intricate patterns that muffled footsteps and added warmth. The old tapestries came down, carefully rolled and stored, replaced by paintings she commissioned from local artists, landscapes, abstracts, pieces that felt modern but not out of place. Furniture arrived in stages, a long dining table made of reclaimed wood, surrounded by chairs that were comfortable as well as beautiful. Sofas and armchairs arranged around the fireplace, upholstered in soft fabrics that invited touch, lamps with warm bulbs, casting gentle light into corners that had been dark for centuries. The castle began to breathe. Erhardt watched it all with something like wonder. He would run his hand over the back of a chair, touch the fabric of a curtain, stand in the center of the great hall, and simply look around as though seeing it for the first time. And perhaps he was. Perhaps he had been blind to what the space could be, trapped in memory and function. "It is beautiful," he said one evening, after the contractors had left and Gwendolyn was arranging books on a newly installed shelf. "You have made it beautiful." She turned to find him standing in the doorway, backlit by lamplight. He looked almost ethereal, a figure from a painting, too perfect to be real. "It was always beautiful," Gwendolyn said. "It just needed someone to see it." He crossed the room to her, moving slowly this time, deliberately. When he reached her, he took her hand in both of his, cradling it gently. His touch was cool, but not unpleasant, like smooth stone. "Thank you," Erhardt said, and there was so much weight in those two words, so much unspoken emotion, that her throat tightened. "You're welcome. I have not thanked anyone in a very long time," he continued. "I have not had reason to. But you have given me something I did not know I was missing. You have given me a home." Gwendolyn felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "It's just curtains and furniture." "No." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, featherlight. "It is far more than that." She was definitely crying now, silent tears slipping down her cheeks, and he released her hand to cup her face instead, thumbs brushing away the wetness. "Why do you weep?" "Because you've been alone for so long," she whispered. "And that's not fair. No one should be that lonely." Erhardt's expression crumbled, just for a moment, vulnerability laid bare. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest, and she clung to him, feeling the solidity of him, the strength. He did not breathe, she realized. His chest did not rise and fall, but his arms were steady, and that was enough. "You undo me," he murmured into her hair. "You walk into my fortress and dismantle every wall I have built. How is that possible?" "I'm very good at my job," Gwendolyn said, muffled against his shirt. He laughed, the sound rumbling through her. "Yes, you are." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped together in the warm glow of lamplight, and Gwendolyn thought that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Maybe a human and a vampire could find something real. Maybe curtains and furniture were just the beginning. Then the lights went out. Not just the lamps, everything. The whole castle plunged into darkness so complete it felt solid, pressing against her eyes. Gwendolyn gasped, tightening her grip on Erhardt. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice sharp now, commanding. "Do not move." "What's happening?" "The wards." His arms turned to iron around her. "Someone has breached the wards." "What wards? Erhardt, what are you talking about?" But he was already moving, pulling her with him through the darkness. She stumbled, blind, trusting him to guide her. They climbed stairs, turned corners, passed through doorways, until finally he stopped and pushed her into a space that felt small and enclosed. "Stay here," he ordered. "Do not leave this room. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Wait. But he was gone, the door closing with a heavy thud, and she was alone in the dark. Gwendolyn felt along the walls until she found a light switch. She flipped it, and a single bulb flickered to life overhead. She was in a small chamber, windowless, with stone walls and a floor covered in chalk markings, circles and symbols that looked ancient and complex. A warded room, a safe room. Her heart pounded. Breach the wards, he had said, which meant the castle had defenses, protections she had known nothing about, which meant someone was attacking. She sank down against the wall, hugging her knees, and waited. Time crawled. Minutes felt like hours. She strained her ears, listening for sounds of fighting, of anything, but the stone walls were too thick. She was trapped in silence. Finally, after what might have been an hour or 3 hours or 10 minutes, the door opened. Erhardt stepped inside, and Gwendolyn's breath caught. There was blood on his shirt, black in the dim light, and a cut along his cheek that was already healing, the skin knitting together as she watched. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, crossing to her in 2 strides. "No, I'm fine." She stood on shaky legs. "What happened? Who was that?" "The Valdorans." His voice was flat, emotionless. "An old enemy. They have been waiting for centuries for an opportunity to strike, and we gave it to them." "We?" Erhardt gestured around the small chamber. "These wards protect the castle from intrusion. They are woven into the very architecture, walls, windows, doorways. Every stone is part of the defense." Understanding crashed over her like cold water. "The renovations?" "Yes." "Oh God." She pressed her hands to her mouth. "I've been dismantling your defenses. Every change I made, every wall I opened up, every window I covered, I've been tearing down the wards." "You did not know." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me that I was putting you in danger?" "Because I did not realize until tonight." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "The wards are old, complex. I knew they would be affected by structural changes, but I thought the foundation would hold. I was wrong." Gwendolyn's mind raced. The curtains, the rugs, the furniture, every single thing she had added, she had done with love, with care, trying to transform his fortress into a home, and in doing so, she had nearly gotten him killed. "I have to undo it," she said. "All of it. We have to put everything back the way it was." "No." She stared at him. "What do you mean, no? Erhardt, you're under attack. You need those protections." "I need you more." He closed the distance between them, taking her face in his hands. "Do you not understand? For centuries, I have hidden behind these walls, safe and alone and miserable. You showed me another way. You showed me what life could be. I will not return to that darkness." "You'll die," she whispered. "Then I will die in a home surrounded by beauty, with your memory warming me." His eyes were fierce. "That is worth any price." "No." Gwendolyn gripped his wrists. "No, that's not acceptable. There has to be another way." "There is not?" "There is." An idea sparked in her mind, fragile and desperate. "The wards are woven into the architecture, right? Into the physical structure?" "Yes." "Then we reweave them. We redesign the wards to incorporate the changes I've made. We make the castle a home and a fortress." Erhardt went very still. "That's not possible." "Why not? You said yourself the wards are complex, so we make them more complex. We adapt them." She was talking faster now, the idea taking shape. "I can map out every change I made, every structural alteration. You understand the magic, the old protections. Together, we can create something new, something stronger. It would take weeks, months, and the Valdorans will not wait. Then we work fast," she set her jaw, "and we fight them off while we do it." He studied her for a long moment, and she watched the conflict play across his face, hope and fear, desire and resignation. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, we will try." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Erhardt said grimly. "The next attack will come soon, and it will be worse. You may regret this decision." "I won't." She reached up and pulled his head down, pressing her forehead to his. "I promise." They worked through the night. Erhardt spread out ancient texts in the library, books bound in leather and skin, pages covered in languages Gwendolyn could not read. He translated as he went, explaining the principles of wardcraft, how intention and structure combined, how symbols could be hidden in architectural choices, how defense and beauty were not opposites, but complements. Gwendolyn sketched and measured, mapping every change she had made to the castle. The curtains became part of the warding, heavy fabric infused with intention, creating barriers that could stop intrusion as well as light. The rugs were drawn with hidden symbols, patterns that looked decorative but served a purpose. The furniture itself became part of the defense, placement, and material chosen for more than aesthetics. It was exhausting work, meticulous and demanding, but Erhardt was patient, and Gwendolyn was stubborn, and slowly a new design emerged. "Here," she said, pointing to her tablet, "if we reinforce this wall with ironwood panels, real wood, not veneer, and carve these symbols into the grain, it becomes part of the ward without losing the warmth." Erhardt leaned over her shoulder, studying the design. "Yes, that could work. And if we extend the pattern into the ceiling beams, it creates a network." Gwendolyn zoomed out, showing the full floor plan. Every room connects. The whole castle becomes one cohesive ward instead of individual protections. "Stronger," Erhardt murmured. "Unified." "Exactly." He turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her heart skip. "You are brilliant. I'm practical," but she could feel herself blushing. "And I really don't want you to die." "I have no intention of dying." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not when I have finally found a reason to live." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Gwendolyn swallowed hard. "Erhardt, I am in love with you," he said simply. "I fell the moment you told me my castle needed curtains. You stood in my great hall, this tiny human with a tablet and opinions, and you saw past the stone to what could be. How could I not love you?" Her breath shuddered out. "I love you too. Which is terrifying because you're ancient and powerful and I'm just perfect," he interrupted. "You are perfect." Then he kissed her, and Gwendolyn forgot how to think. His mouth was cool and soft and demanding all at once, and she rose up on her toes to meet him, fingers tangling in his white hair. The kiss deepened, and she felt the press of his fangs against her lower lip, a reminder of what he was, but she was not afraid. She had never been less afraid in her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, well, she was breathing hard. He was doing an admiration imitation. He rested his forehead against hers. "We will make this work," Erhardt said. "I swear it." "Together," Gwendolyn agreed. "Together." The second attack came 3 days later. They were in the great hall, directing contractors as they installed the new ironwood panels when the air itself seemed to shudder. Gwendolyn felt it like a physical blow, pressure against her skull, and then the doors exploded inward. Vampires poured through, 5, 6, 7 of them, all with that same white skin and hair, that same predatory grace. But where Erhardt moved with controlled power, these creatures were wild, vicious. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light, and their lips were pulled back to reveal fangs. "Get behind me," Erhardt commanded, and Gwendolyn obeyed without question. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the intruders. "Valdorin," he said, his voice cold, "you trespass." One of the vampires, a woman with hair like spun glass and a smile like a blade, laughed. "Trespass? Dear Erhardt, we are simply reclaiming what was promised to us centuries ago. This territory, this castle, your head on a pike. The old treaties are void. Are they? You hid behind your wards for so long, we thought you would never emerge. But then we felt them weaken, felt the gaps forming, and we knew our time had come." The woman's eyes slid past Erhardt to land on Gwendolyn. "And you have brought us a gift, a human pet. How delightful." Erhardt moved so fast Gwendolyn did not see it, and suddenly he was across the hall with his hand around the woman's throat. "You will not touch her." "Or what?" the woman choked out. "You cannot fight all of us, Erhardt, not anymore. Your age has made you slow, soft." He threw her across the room, and she slammed into the stone wall with a sickening crack. The other vampires hissed, crouching to attack, and then chaos erupted. Erhardt fought like a storm, all controlled violence and precision. He moved through the attackers like water, breaking bones, tearing flesh, moving too fast for Gwendolyn's eyes to track. But there were so many of them, and he was alone. One of the vampires broke away from the fight, heading straight for Gwendolyn. She scrambled backward, grabbing the first thing she could reach, a fireplace poker, and swung it with all her strength. The iron connected with the vampire's skull, and he screamed, the metal burning his skin. He staggered back, and Gwendolyn swung again, catching him in the chest. "Iron!" she shouted to Erhardt. "They're vulnerable to iron!" He grabbed one of the new ironwood panels from where it leaned against the wall and wielded it like a weapon, slamming it into the nearest attacker. The vampire shrieked, smoke rising from where the wood touched skin, and fell back. The contractors were screaming, running for the doors. Gwendolyn hoped they made it out, but she could not look away from the battle. Erhardt was bleeding now, dark blood staining his shirt, but he did not slow. He fought with the fury of someone who had everything to lose, and one by one, the Valdoran vampires fell. Finally, only the woman remained. She was crouched by the wall, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle, blood dripping from her mouth, her red eyes fixed on Erhardt with pure hatred. "This is not over," she spat. "No," Erhardt agreed, "it is not, but you will not live to see the next battle." He moved forward, and Gwendolyn looked away. There was a wet, terrible sound, and then silence. When she looked back, Erhardt was alone, standing in the center of the great hall surrounded by bodies. He was shaking, she realized, trembling with exhaustion or adrenaline or both. Gwendolyn ran to him and he caught her, pulling her close. "Are you hurt?" "No. You?" "Nothing that will not heal." He pulled back, checking her over with frantic hands. "You fought well." "I hit a vampire with a fireplace poker. I'm pretty sure that doesn't count as fighting well." "You are alive. That's all that matters." She wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. Instead, she kissed him, fierce and desperate, and he responded in kind, arms tightening around her as though he would never let go. "We need to finish the wards," Gwendolyn said when they broke apart, "before more of them come." "They will come," Erhardt said grimly. "The Valdoran clan is large, and they are patient. We have days at most. Then we work faster." He cupped her face in his hands. "You should leave. Go back to the city where it is safe." "No." "Gwendolyn." "No," she repeated more firmly. "I'm not leaving you. We're in this together, remember? You don't get to send me away now." He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the struggle in his eyes, the desire to keep her safe warring with the need to keep her close. Finally, he nodded. "Together," he said. "Together," she echoed. They called in reinforcements. Erhardt had allies, it turned out, other vampires who owed him debts or simply respected him. They arrived at dusk. A tall, severe man named Lucian, who commanded the Western bloodline, and a woman named Seraphine, who looked barely 20, but moved with the weight of centuries. They took up positions around the castle, standing guard while Erhardt and Gwendolyn worked. The new wards took shape faster with help. Lucian understood the old magics and helped translate texts even Erhardt struggled with. Seraphine had an eye for aesthetics and made suggestions that improved both the design and the defense. And Gwendolyn coordinated it all, sketching and measuring and directing contractors who returned, despite the danger, lured by the promise of triple pay and the strange allure of working for a vampire king. The castle transformed again, but this time with intention woven into every choice. The curtains were sewn with silver thread in protective patterns. The rugs were dyed with herbs that repelled hostile magic. The furniture was arranged in geometries that channeled energy, creating flows and eddies of power that would confuse and trap intruders. And at the center of it all, in the great hall, Gwendolyn designed a new hearth. It was massive, built from stones quarried from the original castle walls, carved with symbols that Erhardt etched himself. When lit, the fire would anchor the entire ward system, a heart beating at the core of the defense. "It is beautiful," Seraphine said, studying the plans. "And deadly. They will break themselves against this." "Let us hope so," Erhardt murmured. The final attack came on the 7th night. Gwendolyn was in the great hall, adding the last touches to the hearth when the castle shuddered. Not just the wards this time, the entire structure groaned, stone grinding against stone, and she stumbled. "They are here," Lucian said from his position by the door. "In force." Erhardt appeared at Gwendolyn's side, pulling her to her feet. "Light the hearth, now." She grabbed the torch she had prepared and thrust it into the kindling. The fire caught immediately, roaring to life, and the symbols carved into the stone began to glow. Light spread outward, racing along the walls, across the ceiling, down into the floor. The new wards activated with a sound like singing, high and clear and impossibly beautiful. And outside, the Valdorans screamed. Gwendolyn ran to the window, pulling aside the new curtain, and gasped. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, surrounding the castle, but they could not get close. The wards formed a barrier, shimmering in the air like heat haze, and every time a vampire touched it, they recoiled with smoke rising from their skin. "It is working," she breathed. "Hold," Erhardt warned. "They will test it. Push harder." He was right. The Valdorans gathered, massing at the gates, and then they charged as one. The impact shook the castle, and Gwendolyn felt it in her bones. But the wards held. More than held, they pushed back. Light flared, blinding and fierce, and the vampires fell back, hissing and writhing. "Impossible," Lucian said, something like awe in his voice. "I have never seen wards this strong." "They are not just wards," Erhardt said quietly. "They are home, protection born from love, not just fear. That is the difference." The siege continued through the night. The Valdorans attacked again and again, probing for weaknesses, but they found none. The castle stood firm, warm and bright and unbreachable. And inside, safe behind walls that were finally both beautiful and strong, Gwendolyn allowed herself to hope. When dawn broke, the Valdorans retreated. They melted back into the forest, unable to withstand the light of day, and the castle fell silent. Erhardt found Gwendolyn in the great hall, standing by the hearth. She was exhausted, swaying on her feet, but she was smiling. "We did it," she said. "You did it." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You saved us all." "We saved each other," she corrected. She turned in his arms to face him. "What happens now? Will they come back?" "Not for a long time, perhaps not ever. We have proven ourselves too strong, and the Valdorans are opportunists. They will seek easier prey." "Good." She sagged against him, letting him take her weight. "I'm too tired to fight off another vampire horde." He laughed softly. "Then rest. We are safe now." But she did not move. Instead, she looked up at him, studying his face. "Erhardt, I need to ask you something." "Anything." "I'm human. I'm going to age, and eventually I'm going to die. You're immortal. You'll outlive me by centuries." His expression darkened. "I'm aware." "So what do we do? How does this work?" He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "There is a way. If you wished it, I could turn you, make you like me." Her heart skipped. "Vampire? Yes? Would I lose myself? My memories?" "No, you would still be you. Simply more." He cupped her face. "But I would never ask that of you. It is a choice that must be made freely, without pressure. If you wish to remain human, to live your natural span, I will cherish every moment we have, and when you are gone, I will carry you with me, always." Gwendolyn felt tears sting her eyes. "That's not fair to you." "Neither is compelling you to immortality." She turned the idea over in her mind, examining it from every angle. Immortality. An eternity with Erhardt, watching the world change, designing homes for creatures that lived forever. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I want time to think about it," she said finally. "Not now, not when I'm exhausted and emotional, but someday. Can you give me that?" "I can give you anything," Erhardt said. "Take all the time you need." She kissed him, soft and slow, and whispered against his lips. "Thank you." Months passed. The castle settled into its new form, warm and welcoming and safe. Gwendolyn finished the last of the renovations, transforming every room into something that balanced beauty and function. The drawing room became a library annex lined with comfortable chairs and good lighting. The old armory was converted into a studio where she could work on new designs. Even the towers were softened, their harsh lines hidden behind tapestries and paint. Erhardt bloomed under her care. He smiled more, laughed more, opened himself to the possibility of joy. He invited guests to the castle, other vampires, human allies, anyone who could appreciate what they had built. The great hall filled with warmth and light and conversation, and for the first time in centuries, it felt truly alive. Gwendolyn fell deeper in love with him every day. She learned his quirks, the way he read by candlelight even when electric lamps were available, his fondness for classical music, the surprising gentleness with which he handled anything fragile. He was patient and thoughtful and passionate, and she could not imagine her life without him. On the anniversary of the day she had first walked into his castle and told him it needed curtains, Erhardt found her in the library. She was curled up in his favorite chair, reading one of the books he had recommended, and she looked up with a smile when he entered. "Hello," she said. "Hello." He crossed to her and knelt beside the chair, taking her hand. "I have something for you." He held out a small box, velvet-covered, and Gwendolyn's breath caught. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, but a stone she did not recognize, dark and iridescent, shifting colors in the light. The band was silver, etched with the same symbols that protected the castle. "It was my mother's," Erhardt said quietly, "given to her by my father when they bonded. It is the only thing I have left from my human life." Gwendolyn could not speak. She stared at the ring, at the weight of history and meaning it carried. "I am asking you to marry me," Erhardt continued, "not as a vampire, not as a king, but as a man who loves you more than he thought possible. I am asking you to build a life with me, however long or short that life may be. I am asking you to be my partner, my equal, my home." She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness he possessed. "I love you," Gwendolyn whispered against his mouth. "And I love you," Erhardt replied. "My fierce, brilliant, impossible human. You have given me everything." They were married a month later in the great hall, beneath the curtains she had hung and surrounded by the home she had made. Lucian and Seraphine stood as witnesses, along with a small gathering of humans and vampires who had become friends. It was a simple ceremony, no grand spectacle, just two people promising to stand together against whatever came. When Erhardt kissed her at the end, sealing their vows, the castle seemed to glow, the wards humming with approval. "Welcome home, Lady Eberus," he murmured. "I've been home since the day I told you that you needed curtains," Gwendolyn replied. The question of turning lingered for another year. Gwendolyn wrestled with it privately, weighing desire against fear, love against loss. She watched Erhardt carefully, looking for signs that her aging bothered him, but he never wavered. He loved her at 29, the same as he would love her at 99, or so he swore. But the truth was, she did not want to leave him. She did not want to grow old and die while he remained unchanged. She wanted centuries with him, wanted to design 1,000 homes, wanted to watch the world transform, and know she would face it all with him at her side. So on a cold winter night, 2 years after she had first walked into his castle, Gwendolyn found Erhardt in the library and said, "I've made my decision." He set down his book immediately, giving her his full attention. "Yes? I want you to turn me. I want to be like you." Something blazed in his eyes, fierce and bright, but his voice remained calm. "Are you certain? There is no undoing this." "I'm certain." She crossed to him and took his hands. "I love you. I want to spend eternity with you. I want to be your wife in every way, human and vampire. I want this." He searched her face, looking for doubt, and found none. Finally he nodded. "Then I will give you this gift, gladly and with all my heart." The turning was done in their bedroom, in the tower where they had made their home. Erhardt explained the process carefully. He would drain her to the edge of death, then give her his blood. The transformation would take 3 days, and it would be painful. "I will be with you the entire time," he promised. "You will not face this alone." "I know," Gwendolyn said. She was not afraid. She trusted him absolutely. He kissed her, soft and lingering, and then he struck. His fangs pierced her throat, and she gasped at the sharp pain, but it faded quickly into something else, something warm and intimate. She could feel him drinking, feel her life flowing into him, and it was not frightening. It was connection, communion. When he pulled back, she was dizzy, weak, barely conscious. He bit his own wrist and held it to her mouth. "Drink," he commanded. She obeyed. His blood was strange on her tongue, thick and cold and impossibly rich. But as she swallowed, Strength flooded through her. Not human strength, something greater, something vast. Power hummed in her veins, and she felt herself changing, cell by cell, heartbeat by slowing heartbeat. Then the pain began. It was like burning from the inside out, like her body was tearing itself apart and rebuilding. She screamed, arching off the bed, and Erhardt held her down, murmuring words she could not understand. Time lost meaning. There was only pain, endless and consuming. But true to his word, he never left her. He held her through every convulsion, wiped her forehead when she burned with fever, whispered love and encouragement when she thought she could not bear another moment. On the third day, the pain stopped. Gwendolyn opened her eyes and the world exploded into clarity. She could see every detail, the grain of the wood ceiling, the individual threads in the curtains, the dust motes dancing in the air. She could hear the mice in the walls, the wind outside, Erhardt's breath even though he no longer needed to breathe. She could smell everything, stone and wood and the lingering scent of her own humanity. "Erhardt," she whispered, and her voice sounded different, clearer. "I am here." He was beside her instantly, pulling her into his arms. "How do you feel?" She took stock, stronger, faster. Her body hummed with energy, ready to move, to run, to fight, and she was thirsty, desperately thirsty, with a craving she had never felt before. "I need blood," she said. "I have it prepared." He helped her sit up and handed her a glass filled with dark liquid. She drank it down in 3 gulps and the craving eased. "Is it always like this? The thirst?" "Yes, but you will learn to control it, to manage it. I will teach you." Gwendolyn looked down at her hands. They were paler now, white like his, like moonstone. She touched her face and felt the sharpness of her new fangs. "I'm a vampire," she said, awed. "You are." Erhardt kissed her forehead. "You are mine, and I am yours for all eternity." She laughed, giddy and overwhelmed, and threw her arms around him. "I love you. God, I love you so much. And I love you, my wife, my partner, my equal." He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes warm. "Welcome to forever." Learning to be a vampire took time. Gwendolyn had to relearn how to move without breaking things, how to control her strength, how to feed without losing herself to instinct. Erhardt was patient, guiding her through each step, and slowly she adapted. The world looked different through immortal eyes. Colors were sharper, sounds more distinct. She could read in the dark, move in silence, sense the emotions of those around her. It was intoxicating and terrifying and wonderful. But the best part was Erhardt. They had centuries ahead of them now, endless time to explore and learn and love. They traveled, visiting cities and countries she had only dreamed of. They designed homes together, combining her aesthetic sense with his knowledge of magical defenses. They built a life that was rich and full and entirely their own. And always they returned to the castle. To the home she had made, the fortress they had defended, the place where their love had taken root. 5 years after her turning, they hosted a grand feast. It was midwinter, the forest outside blanketed in snow, and the great hall blazed with light and warmth. Vampires and humans mingled, eating and drinking and laughing, and the castle rang with joy. Gwendolyn stood by the hearth, watching the celebration, and felt Erhardt's arms slip around her waist from behind. "Happy?" he murmured in her ear. "Incredibly," she said, "though I still say the East Tower could use better lighting." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Then redesign it. You are the lady of this castle. It is yours to shape as you wish." She turned in his arms to face him. "It's ours. Everything we've built, everything we are, it's ours together." "Yes," Erhardt agreed. He kissed her, soft and sweet, and she felt the bond between them hum with contentment. Together. Around them, the feast continued. Music played, voices rose in song, and the castle that had once been cold and empty and lonely was now filled with life. The curtains Gwendolyn had hung so long ago stirred in the draught from the fireplace, crimson and gold, beautiful and strong. She had walked into a fortress and told a king it needed curtains. He had handed her a deed and told her to decorate. And together they had built something neither could have imagined, a home that was also a haven, a place where love and safety intertwined, where beauty and strength were one. "To forever," Gwendolyn said, raising her glass. "To forever," Erhardt echoed, touching his glass to hers. And in the great hall of Castle Eberus, surrounded by friends and firelight and the home she had made, Gwendolyn knew that she had found exactly where she belonged. Not just in a place, but in a person. Not just for now, but for always. The curtains swayed gently in the warmth, and outside, the snow fell soft and steady, blanketing the world in peace.